Gentlemen, who is the AP government teacher?
Mr. Gomez.
Will you tell him that Brian Marl said hello?
He talked about you.
Oh, okay. Good things? Okay. 50-50? All right. Yeah.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is the Saline City Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, October 11th, 2023. Will the recording secretary please call the roll?
Young.
Here.
Carroll.
Here.
Fosdick.
Here.
Marl.
Here.
Gearbaugh.
Here.
Cole. Here. Beardsley.
Here.
Heft.
Absent.
Troika.
Also absent. Staff present tonight are City Planner Auerbach, Community Development Director Harrington, and Recording Secretary Katnick. Is there a motion on the table to approve the agenda as distributed?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Is there a motion on the table to approve the meeting minutes of September 27th, 2023 as submitted?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Public comments. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comments. The person is requested but not required to state their name and address for the record. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Seeing no comments, we'll move to new business, 23-23, the 2023 Saline Master Plan Draft, Goals and Policies Chapter, a motion to acknowledge the receipt of the memo dated October 4th, 2023 from Community Development Director Harrington.
Absolutely. Thank you all. So just a very brief update before we hop into the presentation. The 63-day notice for the master plan was sent out on September 13th, which was a Wednesday. That 63 days falls in between what would have been the first and second meeting of the Planning Commission in November. And as many of you probably know, we don't usually meet at that second meeting in November due to its proximity to Thanksgiving. So we have an option to move that meeting to November 15th or take it up as a regular scheduled item at the December meeting, and then there would be no planned business for November, so you would not have to meet in November. Ultimately, that timeline doesn't really make a difference. I feel like we've kind of granularly gone through this process, so I wouldn't expect any surprises on that formal document. When it's presented, you'll have known of all the content that's in that plan prior to receiving it. So I just wanted to bring that up, and we can maybe discuss that at the end of the meeting.
We could discuss it now if you prefer, and we could, talk about our, conflicts if there's anything.
Right, so the question is, would you like to meet on November 15th to just look at the master plan, to hold the required public hearing, and then pass it on to council, who then could take it up as an issue in their first meeting in December? Or would you like to meet in December and then have it be the last item that council takes up at their meeting prior to the start of the new year?
I say the 15th. So the council can deal with it in December. We've been talking about this for a while, so.
Right, so you would still meet it in December, even if we did push it to December 6th as the meeting date, or I think it's just.
You're trying to schedule it for council, though.
Right, so council would then have it at the December 18th meeting, which I believe, because Christmas is a Monday this year. Let me just double check that real quick.
Yes.
Well, even if we meet on the 15th, you couldn't turn it around for the next council meeting. You would have to wait until the first meeting in December.
Right, so what I'm saying is if you heard it, if we didn't schedule a special meeting, you would hear it on December 6th, and that would allow council to then hear it on December 18th. Otherwise, you could hear it on November 15th and have a special meeting, and then have council hear it at December 4th. So,
It's totally, in my judgment, it's the preference of the public members of the Planning Commission. I may not be available on the 15th, but if there's a quorum, I'm meet.
I'd say in the forum, because we don't know what will happen on the 20th.
okay, so I can send out an email after this meeting to do a straw poll, and then we can have it as a discussion item at our next meeting for whether to have no November meetings or have that special 15th meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page on that. So without further ado, goals and policies, part 2. So this evening, we're going to be talking about transportation, municipal service expansion, which is things outlining the city, environment, sustainability, and resilience, and then intergovernmental cooperation. Residential land use and implementation will be the last things we talk about in this plan. We're pivoting our residential land use, as you'll see in the goals and policies chapter currently. It's pretty vague language, and this kind of gives a units per acre range. At the advice of our planning consultant, and after looking at how many other communities do it, as I outlined in my memo, it might be wise for us to switch to that form-based language, which really describes how we want these buildings to look in our city, what types of buildings we'd want to have. So, and like the city density residential, rather than just blanket allowing 20 units per acre, describing really, if that's going to be built, what is it going to look like? So talking about row homes and townhouses as opposed to like a traditional apartment complex, for example. So it gives us a little bit more aesthetic control over the city rather than kind of setting these broad numbers. And really we can build out the types of developments that we like to see. So it gives us a little bit more power over the design, gives us a little bit more clarity on what we're really hoping to accomplish. So CWA is currently reviewing those standards that I have drafted, and they'll come to you at your next meeting for your thoughts and criticisms. So again, just to go over the goals and policies chapter layout, as we did at the last meeting, each policy area has a few overarching goals. Each goal has objectives, and then each objective is being addressed in the implementation plan, which is part of that full draft that's on our website, as well as was originally submitted to you. So to start with transportation, the first goal is to plan and provide a safe and efficient vehicular transportation network. The new goals being pursue opportunities to expand public transit in Saline, and then a specific addition to that third goal, or third objective, to improve the safety of existing east-west routes, as well as bolstering Saline's north-south connectivity. The second goal is to create a robust pedestrian and non-motorized transportation network. All these goals are new. Plan and construct trails proposed in Saline non-motorized transit plan, and this connect with Washtenaw County Parks and Recreation to plan regional connectivity. Work with MDOT on the creation of safer pedestrian crossings throughout the downtown, especially at the intersection of Ann Arbor Street and Michigan Avenue. We've talked about potentially just changing this to create safer pedestrian crossings on Michigan Avenue. Moving on to municipal service expansion, just to outline what the current urban development areas that were established in 2011 are. You'll see the ones with Lodi Township, where areas are planned for suburban or rural residential. We don't really have a definition of rural residential, so this is perhaps something to consider changing, but not something that we touch with this current plan. And then in the Saline Township urban development area, we have areas marked for mixed-use business. Some of those will not happen. As I said, this was done in 2011 before the creation of Annalena Farms. Again, looking at low density, city density, and then open space recreation. As we'll hop into here in the goals, one of the requirements is whenever those properties would be annexed into the community, we would then have to zone them something. So this chapter was largely kept the same, but just reorganized to look like the other sections. So the overarching goals then are to facilitate the moderate and orderly growth of city boundaries. Another goal is that annexed land should be used in a manner that fits the context of the surrounding city area and addresses known or anticipated city needs, with the objectives listed below. Again, the zoning would be established by the city at the point of annexation, and we would do a master plan amendment at the point of annexation. So those are things to consider. We're not bound to the things on this map, but the general idea would be to stay in conformity with this map. These are kind of large decisions to make, obviously, on what we would like these annexed areas to be. And it's definitely difficult to do that in such a prospective nature when we don't necessarily know who owns these lands or who they're being sold to or what the intention of them is. Annalena Farms, again, kind of being an example of that. Moving on to environment, sustainability, and resilience. There are 4 goals in this section. There's one on the next page. So the first one is to integrate natural resources into an open space system. The second goal is to protect and enhance wetland, woodland, water resources, drainage systems, and open space. They're all highlighted here in yellow, and this is a comment I think Mr. Beardsley made at the last meeting about why we pared so many of these things down. They were heavily written from an engineering design perspective, which is great, but we primarily moved all that information to the implementation plan, as it really is kind of the functional end of these things. Talking with Carlisle Wortman, though, it might be in the city's interest to adopt a wetland or a woodland ordinance and adopt better language surrounding those water resources and drainage systems, which is what our city engineer is in the process of doing. So we can maybe change that language a little bit to accommodate more directly what we're talking about, and that's something I'm working with CWA to do, to make it a little bit more than consideration and more towards the city ought to be adopting an ordinance on these items to make sure that we're protecting them. Additionally, we have a new item here of bolster existing green space and parks that talks about transparently and accurately reporting on planned park projects, plan and construct trails proposed in that 2022 Saline non-motorized pathway plan, and construct capital improvements featured in that 2022 Saline Master Plan, Parks Master Plan, which is separate from this one. And then lastly, standards for and promotion of green technology, investigating benefits of solar panels and an ordinance allowing solar panels as it's not clearly outlined in our zoning code at this moment. Encourage and support the greater use of solar panels, which is something our Environmental Commission has been working on with various common interest communities throughout the city. That would be HOAs, condo boards, things like that. Provide accessible information to Saline residents on what's needed to install electric vehicle chargers at their own private residence, which is more of staff, building department information. And then study the best locations for and install electric vehicle chargers on public property in an adequate manner. Keyword there being adequate, looking at City Hall, some of our public parking lots, and our parks as well. So making sure that we're covering those bases, and something, again, that the city is already proactively working on, but I think this reaffirms our commitment to those items. And then lastly, intergovernmental cooperation has one goal: to promote effective working relations between the cities, surrounding communities, and the Saline area schools. There's only two real objectives here. One is planning issues which are integral to the discussion between the various bodies should be proactively discussed. And then two, the Washtenaw area transportation study should be consulted regarding transportational issues of regional significance. There's definitely more language in here that was aspirational about 5 years ago about establishing joint planning commissions with some of our outlying townships. Taking the temperature recently of some of our relations with those outside townships, it doesn't necessarily seem to be in our own benefit to establish some sort of joint planning committee, especially given the city's annexation powers. So maybe scaling back on how much deference we're going to be giving to the townships, and really, just discussing these things proactively with our township neighbors who might be subject to annexation for city services. So with that, I'll take us to the end. Are there any specific goals or objectives that you take issue with out of this section or would like to be refined? Are there any that you want added? Do you have feedback on the way the plan is organized? And then what other items featured here do you have commentary on? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Fairly innocuous addition. Can you go back, I think, 3 slides where you make reference to WATS, the Washtenaw Area Transportation Study regarding transportation issues of a regional significance? I would also include SEMCOG in that list.
Absolutely.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
A couple things. One, I like the idea of the form-based residential design features, and you're citing some communities that have used it. I wondered if you could, as we deliberate this, provide maybe visual examples of how that has worked in those communities so that we really have a good sense of what it means to see it, as well as how long they've been doing it and any other kind of observations about the benefits of that. Higher density is obviously one of the objectives here, which by itself is not bad, but at the same point, we want it to be sustainable and clear in terms of what we're going for. So I just found it a little bit maybe less easy to understand. I also really like the presentation that you give here because it gives the benefit of deleting all of the deleted text or the moved text. So it's much more succinct and easy to follow. I wonder if in the future, maybe it's almost too late to do it at this point because we're down to our last few changes, that we could get a Word version of these documents so that we could actually eliminate all the changes and just see what is being proposed as an alternative
Absolutely.
view. And the last comment I would make is, I think we talked about, especially with the future land use map, identifying, because you did it in one of your presentations a couple meetings ago where you had circles on what has changed. And it's really hard for us, at least for me, to identify the changes by trying to compare 2 maps. Whereas if all you did was circle it to bring our attention to it, it would help. I continue to have a little concern, probably not a little concern about the office proposed zoning along North Ann Arbor Street.
Absolutely.
It's not so much the office, it's sort of what can go along in that description that gives me concern. But I'd like to know if there's other changes that I just am not picking up on. Thank you.
I want to piggyback off of Mr. Beardsley. Whenever I sent you my comments yesterday, I had asked also about those densities for the low density, the city density, and the high density, and, saying, have we agreed on this? Is this is this kind of what we're going to, and also what it would look like. So yeah, that would be a great visual to have.
Right, absolutely. So the whole goal is to eliminate, with some clarification, not like necessarily eliminate some of those upper end caps, because we need some sort of definitive caps in these neighborhoods to ensure that we're not getting super, super tiny houses. Right, the form-based code kind of moves away from that, and you'll see it in the next meeting, essentially.
Okay, great, thank you. Yes.
Just a couple things. Ben, when you're mentioning the map, when I'm looking at it, the proposed urban development areas, these are the full urban development areas for Saline Township?
Yeah, so this is what has been in the plan since 2011. I don't believe there have been any formal changes to this. I think this was somewhat aspirational to begin with, but I'm not quite sure on that necessarily.
Just because I'm looking at Lodi, I didn't understand that we actually had something to that effect, except for close to where Waterworks Road was, as you start going farther north. Especially the one yellow area, or light yellow, that's already pretty much developed.
Okay.
I would look at that and actually, we can check with Lodi to see, is that even in their consideration that would come in the city.
Thankfully, we're sitting next to Lodi's planner.
So those couple of spots there, I think, are a question. And then you're mentioning sustainability, and maybe this is more of an issue related to building codes and such. But how do we incorporate like LEED and those type of situations? Can that be put into the master plan, or is that more a building code concern?
I would defer to the planning consultant on that one.
Sure, you could certainly reference a desire for LEED standards in the master plan. It would be, I think, I'm not sure if it could be a building or a zoning requirement. It could certainly be aspirational. But there are, for other typical types of renewable technology, solar in particular, those are easy zoning amendments that are likely already feasible under the building code. It just may be a matter of defining it in the zoning ordinance as well.
Yeah, from the perspective of, depending on how you lay out the homes or whatever, could be a better angle from the sun and all that kind of stuff, incorporating that instead of just necessarily building it and then not being able to take advantage of how the location and such is done. And then there are just a couple of things, and Ben, we can look at it. There's some identifications in terms of, when I look at both the future land use unit, where there's some public properties that are still not identified as being either park and recreation or semi-private, namely the depot. I just want to make sure that it's not identified as being kind of commercial. As for the other ones about density, it'll be helpful to get that information to you, because that's one of the things that I'm more concerned about, is understanding how that density will apply in existing neighborhoods.
Right, so I can just give you a little bit of a preview on that. When we're talking about form, we're talking about where on the lot it's located. So like in a traditional suburban home, you'd expect to have yards on all four sides. So clearly delineating in a suburban neighborhood, the homes are going to be generally located in the center of the lot with yards on all four sides. When you're talking about density, you're really talking about height and then setback distances, which then go back to that location. And then we can include specific provisions that, like in this district, we want to see the preservation of historic homes. So like a use in this district is maybe duplexes, but also historic homes. So that way we're making sure we're not usurping maybe things that have built the Saline character historically with these provisions for additional density. So it's kind of a balancing act, but it allows us to specifically balance those two in a way that the UPA regulations don't. But like I said, we'll talk about that more next week or 2 weeks from now.
And then actually, lastly, when I came up, when we talk about trails, motorized path trails and such, we got into a discussion about the materials that are used for those trails. And so asphalt is being substituted for concrete and those type of things. Is there a way to address that even from a sustainability and resilience? Concrete lasts decades longer than asphalt does in certain locations and such. And as we talk about all the plans that we move forward, I want to see that we have the best materials so that we're not having to eventually replace those as frequently as we currently are.
Right, I think that's definitely an aspirational element we could add. I don't think the Parks Master Plan speaks to the construction of those trails specifically, which is one of the issues that we're having with it, is what are we actually going to do with this? Where are the prospective trails versus where are the built trails? But I think that's something we could definitely add, note the building material of the trails should be of a substantial nature.
Because that's where we ran into trouble with the Lair Farms one, was that master plan for the Parks Trail said it could be asphalt, but everything else should have concrete. So the argument that I put forward was no, and then because our master plan said asphalt, we went with the cheaper. Instead of making it connected to the city like we do with everything else with asphalt, so out of the sidewalk. So I just want to make sure that we adjust that and make sure we get that in the future.
Sure, I think that'd be reasonable. I mean, the master plan's supposed to be a framework or and include as a basis for the capital improvements plan too, so you could put things like that in there.
No problem with having trails like in the parks where you know they're not going to be heavily used, but some of these where it's on the onus of either the HOA or the homeowners to replace that, and putting in asphalt, you're doing the same thing that we've seen in what's going to happen like with them on the farm. You're putting a potential liability on them that's, we know is not going to last that long. We sort of prevent that from happening.
Additional comments?
Maybe just one.
Yes.
I'd noticed some tweaking of the text in your presentation versus what was in the packages. And I just wondered if we could be maybe alerted if things are going to change between the packages and the presentation.
Right, so anything highlighted in the yellow would have been what was changed. Is there another specific?
I just picked up on it. It was really small. It said, work with HOAs on solar panels, and then it changed in your presentation to.
Oh, I'm sorry, I meant to highlight that. Yeah, that was a specific recommendation of our consultants.
And it makes sense the way
Right.
you presented it, I think.
Right, I had usually been
More
highlighting
broadly.
those to be a little bit clearer, so I apologize for missing that
Right,
one.
no problem. Thank you.
Is there additional discussion?
Oddly enough, when you mentioned HOAs and solar panels, there's legislation possibly moving forward to exempt
Right, that would help.
HOAs from being able to enforce everything. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with it.
Oh, that's sort of the flip side of the whole short-term rentals
Exactly.
argument. Wow.
Well, that was the other one that I just gave that an article, short-term rentals, and there's a band on the west side now pursuing the train with
Yeah.
that band, so.
That was the one I cited 2 weeks ago, Park Township, yeah.
If there's nothing further, Madam Chair, I'd move to acknowledge receipt of the memo dated October the 4th.
I'll second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Are there any discussion items tonight?
I just have one.
Yes.
I don't, again, I've used the same verbiage in the past. I'm not sure why it gets under my skin so much, but it does. Can we make sure sometime in the next couple months just to get some sort of official communique to CPS about painting their gateway fence
Yes.
in front of their property?
I believe we've already opened an enforcement on it, so
Okay, very good.
we will have our
That was
enforcement.
part of their final site plan to maintain that. It can be an attractive asset and beneficial to the community. They use wood instead of other material, which requires paint, yet they habitually fail to.
Right, well, and thankfully, the blight ordinance is written broadly enough that I don't necessarily even have to find, unless they chose to remove the fence, then we would have some issues, but it's a pretty easy thing, or code-wise, it's not very ambiguous, so to speak, so.
Just to tag on that, where are we with site plan review?
It's coming along, it's going to be within this year. I'm sorry, with the master plan and some of these other items, it's kind of got bogged down. But right, I imagine we're going to do the business visits. There's going to be some early contenders for that, but we're likely going to go up East Michigan and then through the industrial parks to start, and then, we have to choose some sort of systematic way to go about it, but we will be getting on that, so.
Madam Chair, I'll move to excuse the absences of Vice Chair, or no, they're both at-large members now, aren't they? At-large member Heft and at-large member Troika.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Is there a motion on the table to adjourn the meeting at 7:24 PM?
So move.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, this is a pigsty.
Yeah, I don't know what,
Somebody-